Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Giovanna Cruz, and this webinar today is titled 5 Keys to Success for Small School Band Directors. I am an Education Services Manager. I've worked for MakeMusic since 2014. I've designed, built, delivered, and evaluated online and in-person training for a number of districts across the country. I also present Spark Music and Finale clinics at music educators conferences. And prior to working for MakeMusic, I was an orchestra director in Austin, Texas, where I still live. I am part of the MakeMusic education team, and part of what we do is share feedback and provide communication from customers back to MakeMusic, design and build that training, present the clinics, and create videos, webinars, and articles as resources to help teachers. So I'm going to introduce our guest today. His name is Donny Longest, and Donny is a recently retired band director. He had a long and prosperous career of 33 years. He's also past president of the Oklahoma Bandmasters Association, was named Band Director of the Year in 2004, and was a finalist in 2006. And he was also inducted in the Oklahoma Bandmasters Association Hall of Fame in 2015. During his 21 years at the Kanawha Band, he received superior rating 20 consecutive times. And that was both at marching contest and district concert contest. And then his band also received sweepstakes 12 times since the year 2000. And he presented his concerts with an honor group at the Oklahoma Music Educators State Conference in 2015. We met him last year at the Midwest Clinic, where he did this fabulous presentation that you're going to hear today. And so we feel very fortunate to have him here. And without much further ado, here is Donny.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, thanks for being here this afternoon so we can talk about being a small school band director. One of the first things that I want to do, though, is kind of define what a small school is. So a lot of you out there are going to have different ideas of what a small school is. In my 33 years, I taught in 3 different schools. The first one was what I would consider a fairly small school. The next one was, at the time, the 30th largest school district in Oklahoma. So it was in the top classification in Oklahoma at the time. And then my final 21 years were in Kanawha, which is in southeastern Oklahoma. So if you know anything about Oklahoma geography, it's about an hour and 15 minutes southeast of Oklahoma City. A very rural community, very poor community. And the size of that school, the last year I was there, top 4 grades 9, 10, 11, 12, just a little under 200 students. So that's going to be kind of my launching pad here for what a small school is. Some of you may be in smaller schools than that, so you're thinking, gosh, Kanawha was a big school. But that's going to be my perspective today in talking about a small school. So what I like to do whenever I do this presentation is to always introduce my staff that I worked with at Kanawha. You go to these big marching contests, and they always introduce their staff. So I like to introduce my staff. So here we go. This is my brass instructor. All right. And here's my woodwind instructor. And I hear all of you laughing now. That's good. And here is my percussion instructor. So if you notice the same face, yes, it's the same guy. You also know that person was also not just the high school band director, but the middle school band director, the beginning band instructor, the band secretary, the trip planner, and in most schools, that person is also the bus driver. So now you kind of have an idea of what we're talking about with being in a small school. Let me preface everything by saying I think being a director in a small school is one of the most rewarding things that you can ever do. And hopefully I'll be able to relay that message to you as we go along. So we're going to basically talk about 5 big areas today, 5 keys to being a successful band director and also surviving as a small school band director. So the first area is you have to be passionate. Have you ever made that mistake of going into the teacher's lounge and all the grumpy old teachers who've been teaching for a long time, and you hear them say, I hate kids. I hate this job. I hate teaching. And you kind of ask yourself, so why are they doing it? And so I think to be a really successful small school band director, you have to have a real passion for teaching kids. Now, you notice I didn't say you have to have a passion for teaching music. You have to have a passion for teaching kids. All of us came out of great college ensembles, where everyone made great sounds, and you may not hear those great sounds out in small town America band programs. So you have to have a real passion for teaching kids. When you're out in that community by yourself, you're not going to get a lot of chances to play your instrument probably. So you're focusing on the kids and the job at hand. You got to love what you do. Again, those teachers who have kind of been burnt out and they don't quite have that passion anymore usually don't do as good a job. So you really want to have that love for what you do. And I guarantee you the kids are going to pick up on that. One of the things in a small school you get the real advantage of is you see those kids come in like the 5th or 6th grade. In Conowall, we started in 5th grade, and you get to see those kids all the way through high school. You get to see them grow not only as people, but as musicians. I remember all those little kids that came in 5th grade, could barely hold that trombone, and then by the time they're a senior, they're an all-stater. And what amazing progress they made in those 8 years. You also just get to see them grow up as people and share in their ups and downs through those 8 years. And they will appreciate what you've done for them through those times. One thing we would always do at our spring concert is we would take the seniors and we would take their senior picture, and then we would take their 5th grade picture and put it in the program at the spring concert. And that they always, I don't know, they always appreciated me doing that because of their 5th grade pictures, but it was just kind of going down memory lane kind of thing. Are you excited every day to go to the band room and get the job done? I was just telling Giovanna a while ago, there were very few days in my 33 years that I considered it a job. It was something I just woke up ready to go to the band room and see what we could get done that day. And I think if you have that kind of passion about teaching, you'll be very successful in the small school. The next is to have an impact. And I should have put on there, you will have an impact. We all know how much time we spend with students throughout the year, especially this time of year. We're in marching band. You've got early or late rehearsals. You've got ball games on Thursday or Friday night. You've got contests on Saturday. We're spending a lot of hours with those kids. And so you are going to have an impact on those kids. And I think sometimes it's more in a small school than in a large school. Having been in both, I think those relationships grow stronger in a small school. And I think you have that opportunity to build those relationships, of course, within professional parameters that are going to have a tremendous impact on the students that are in your classroom every day. If you have developed those relationships and you have that passion for those kids, when you have a student that decides not to be in your band the next year, that hurts. And I always took that personal, and I think it was just because I knew how much time I'd invested in those students, and I hated to see them not use the talent that they had. If you've taught for very long, you've probably had this happen where students have come back and said, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, I appreciate what you did for me. If you're a young teacher, those days are coming. I have a file at home where I have notes from students from the years past, and thank you cards and wedding invitations and those kind of things that they felt like I was a huge part of their life, not just in the band room. So you're going to have a tremendous impact. I have students who are in all walks of life. I have former students who are doctors, engineers, you name it. I have 4 or 5 here in Oklahoma that are band directors. So if you go into it thinking, all these students are going to be great band directors, no, but they can be great people. Here's the kind of impact you can have on your students. I've had the great fortune of officiating the wedding ceremony of 10 of my former students. That's a great honor for me to have been able to do that. I've also had the honor of walking 2 of my former students down the aisle at their wedding. You know, their dads passed away the year before they got married, and they asked me to do that. So that shows the kind of impact you can have on students when they ask you to share in that big day in their life. Another thing, a way to build those relationships with your students is go to their outside activities. In a small school, a lot of the students do more than just band. You know, they're playing football, they're playing basketball, they're playing soccer, they're, doing all these other things. And I would always have students ask me, Mr. Longest, are you going to come to our game tonight? You bet, I'll be there. And that showed them you realized they had a life outside the band room. And I think because of that, I think they worked harder for me in the band room because I realized they were busy. They had other things going on. And I think they enjoyed seeing me there at those games. And so I think that helped them to work harder for me when we were in the band room. Next, what's your attitude? And this goes back to having that passion, loving what you do. Your students will certainly know what kind of attitude you portray. Is it this one? Is it this one? Yikes. Or is it this one? And those students, when they walk in that door in the morning, they're gonna pick up real fast what kind of attitude you have that day. You know, I used to have students hang out in the band room. Again, Conoway was a small community. A lot of students were from homes that weren't the greatest. And so the band room was kind of their safe haven. And, there were times I would catch myself getting frustrated saying, why aren't you guys practicing? And then I'd have to realize, wait a second, they just need to hang out. And they just need to be with their friends in an environment that it's safe. And so hopefully you can generate that kind of atmosphere in your band room. One thing that I did every day, and this is going to sound probably pretty corny to some of you, I made sure that I started every morning by telling my band good morning. And I made them answer me back by saying good morning. And you're thinking, well, that's kind of corny, but here's why. A lot of those kids, that may be the first positive thing they've heard since they left school the previous day. Give you an example. A few years ago, we went to our regional marching contest. We performed, we'd gone to eat lunch, and one of my bus drivers, who was one of the teachers at school, gets on her phone and finds out that one of my students' dad had been arrested basically that morning. And so that student had been woken up at 3 a.m. with a flash grenade thrown in his bedroom window. And so that good morning probably meant something to that young man. And so never think that just a simple good morning to your students is unimportant, because I think probably that young man, he was glad to be in a positive place, in a positive group that day. So think about those things as you start your day every day. We all get stressed and we all get tired, but try to present a positive attitude in your band room where the students feel safe. The next area is be professional. And we're going to talk about a few things here on being professional. The first is, and you're may think, what is this guy talking about? How do you dress? Let me show you the next slide. And if we were all together here, I would say, when and where was that picture taken? And so when I did this at Midwest last December, I got several answers. But the when and where it was taken was in the 30s, one of the poorest times in our country, at a baseball game. And look at how they're all dressed. Suits and ties for the guys, with hats. Most of the ladies are in dresses. Now, most of us don't dress near that nice anymore on a daily basis. And so what I asked the crowd at Midwest was, what do you get from that picture? And I finally got, after 4 or 5 answers, the answer I was looking for. It was respect. It was respect for how things were to be during that time period. So now I'm not saying that you all need to wear suits and ties to school every day. That's not it. But I think you do have to be aware of what's appropriate in your situation. So, for instance, in a small town, most of the time the teachers are the biggest professional class in that community. And so how does the community expect you to dress on a daily basis at school? If you come from, say, a different part of the country and you come into a community, try to be observant as to how people dress and make sure that you don't do something that's going to offend somebody, okay? So just make sure that you're dressed appropriately for your situation. Some schools will have a dress code for you. They'll say you can't wear jeans, can't wear shorts, can't wear sweats, whatever. Some may not, so just be aware of that. I think your students will notice that. It was always funny if my students saw me the first time they would come into high school band and our first marching rehearsal, and they would see me in shorts and t-shirt, and they were shocked because I wasn't in slacks and as they called them, golf shirts. So just be aware of that and make sure you dress professionally. Oh, and one more thing on the dress thing. How do you expect your students to dress? Like in Oklahoma, we start football season in August. It's really hot. And I used to have my students a lot of times wear jeans and their band t-shirt. They acted different than when they were in uniform. And so we finally went to a slacks and a polo shirt, and they acted different. And I think they would do the same thing with how you're dressed. If you dress professionally, they're going to take things a little more serious. This next point, how do you talk to students? And this is going to maybe directed more to younger teachers. We see a lot of people that we hear lots of stories on the news about teachers getting in trouble with students. And it starts out with our conversations with students. I see a lot of young teachers who try to be the student's friend and not the teacher. And so I think you have to be very aware of, how am I going to address the students? How do you let them address you? My students always called me Mr. Longest, at least to my face. But how do you talk to your students? Do you treat them with respect? Do you talk down to them? That's going to turn them off real fast. If you talk to them in a very positive manner, you're going to get a lot better results. When I first went to Kanawha, all new students, I took it as a challenge to learn their names really fast. And so like the second day of high school band camp, I went down the block formation that we're doing fundamentals in and called them all by name. And they were like, you know our names. And I said, I'm supposed to know your names. I'm your teacher. And they said, well, the last guy was here 2 years and didn't know us. I said, well, I will know your name. And so right off the bat, that was a connection that I made with those students because I took the time to learn their name. Every year when the fifth graders would come in, the entire fifth grade class would come to me in the band room. And I made it kind of a game with them that at the end of that first day, I could go down the row and call them all by name. Once you do that, you have a connection. Be careful about corresponding with text messages and social media things. A good friend of mine pointed out this to me that I'd never thought about. He said, if a student texts him and says, what time are we meeting tonight? He always responds, the band is meeting at the band room at such and such time. Instead of just saying, we're meeting at 5 o'clock. That could be misconstrued by someone who doesn't understand what the meaning behind the question is. So be very careful when corresponding with students via text message, social media, so forth. I didn't give out my phone number to most of the students. Somehow they would sometimes find it, but so just be careful in that regard. We don't want to hear about people getting in trouble because of things being misconstrued in messages. Next is, how do you talk to teachers? When I was in school and in the hallways and whatever, talking to teachers, I always tried to address them by Mr. or Mrs. That way the students who were around saw that I was respectful to my colleagues. I had to get onto a secretary one time because she would get on the PA system, intercom system, and say, hey, everybody in Donny Longest class, da, 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 da. And I had to go to her and say, they don't need to hear my first name. They need to hear Mr. or Mrs. And this may sound real old school, and to those who out there I'm offending, sorry, but I think that's how you have to be. I think we have to be very professional to our teachers. How do you work with the teachers in a small school? You're going to know all those teachers. And they're all going to know you, and they're going to know all the kids. And so what kind of relationship do you have with those teachers in working with them? Can you go to them and talk to them about a student? If you're having discipline problems with little Johnny, probably that teacher is too. So at that point, you can sit down with that other teacher, come up with a game plan of, okay, let's figure out what's wrong with little Johnny so we can get his behavior back in check. If you have a student with grade trouble, in Oklahoma, we have you don't pass, you don't play kind of situation. So can you go to other teachers and just ask them, hey, why is little Johnny failing your class? And usually they would show me the grade book and on their computer and hear all these zeros from little Johnny not turning in homework. And so at that point, I can go back to little Johnny and get on his case about, you need to get your work done so that we can pass your classes, so that you can be a part of this team that we're trying to build. Like I said earlier, a lot of students do a lot of things. So how good are you at being able to share your students' time with the other teachers? You have to be reasonable because you want the other teachers to also be reasonable. At Conowal, my 6th and 7th grade bands met in separate classes, but we would combine them for performances. So I had the relationship with the teachers that I could go to them, a couple of weeks before the Christmas concert or spring concert or whatever, and say, hey, can I get these kids these hours to work on the concert? And unless they were given a test or something, they were always very agreeable to that because we had built that relationship ahead of time. Attend conventions and workshops. Giovanna and I were just talking earlier about Midwest. Never stop learning. I was kind of in my career, when I got to the end of my career, I kind of went, I'm not sure that I know as much as I thought I did, and I still need to figure this out. And so attend conventions and workshops at every possibility. Like I said, in a small school, you may be the only music person. I know in Conowal, when I first got there, we had an elementary music teacher, and at one point they dropped that. So I was the music person. As our computer teacher used to call me, he said, hey, band guy. And that's how he addressed me in the hall. So, you don't have those comrades, those colleagues each day to talk to and get ideas from and so on. So make sure you attend your state conventions and your state workshops. Make sure you call directors in the area and steal ideas. I'm not sure that I had an original idea in the 33 years I taught. I think everything was stolen. So make sure you develop those relationships as well. Always, when I went to a convention, kind of re-energized me. And I was like, okay, let's go back and be ready to do this again. Support your professional organizations. Those people, they're your state officers who are trying to put on your conventions and your workshops to help you. Well, they need your help by you being there. And I think a lot of times when you go to those conventions and workshops that are put on by your organizations, a lot of times you can help somebody just by being there and standing around the exhibit hall talking, and they can somebody else can gain some knowledge from you as well as you gaining knowledge from the workshops. Be productive. And this is going to be maybe designed towards some younger teachers, a little more than some of you veteran teachers out there. I see a lot of young teachers who struggle with getting the most out of their groups on a daily basis. So one is to have a plan. What is it you want to get done every day? You're starting with, how do I get kids in band? How do I get those beginners in there? Recruiting is a big issue for band directors, and this is something I think directors in a small school have an advantage over directors in a big school. Big schools, you need to get your jazz band or something and go out to the elementaries and do a concert, and it's a lot of planning. In a small school, those kids are at the ball game on Friday night and they see Mr. Longest up in front of the band. I always made it a point every day, my planning period, to where I walked over to the high school. Of course, the small school, we had all of our campus was on one site. I would make sure that I walked over to the high school, and about that time, the pre-K or the kindergarten kids or first graders, they were walking to lunch or from lunch. And so I'm high-fiving all these kids as I go down the sidewalk. I have no idea who most of these kids are, but they know who Mr. Longest is. And so that's instant recruiting before they ever get to the fifth grade. So I think that's an advantage that you have in a small school. I see a lot of young directors who seem to miss a lot of school. And myself, as well as some other teachers who've retired, we joke about how many sick days we lost because we never used them. But go to work. And I mean that literally, by your body being at school, and figuratively, like, what are you going to get done that day? I was not great on lesson plans per se, like the principal wanted me to turn in, but I did have a plan in mind. I did have an idea. Here's what we have to get done today. And so make sure that you have a plan. My first year at Kanawha, about every other day, the kids would say, "Hey, can we have a free day?" And I said, "What?" And they said, "A free day." No. And so I finally had to get on the podium one day and said, "There are no such things. You're enrolled in band. We're going to play our instruments every day." And so be productive, have a plan, go to work, make sure you get something done. Have both long-term and short-term goals. You take over that job. What is it you want your band to do 5 years down the road? What is it you want them to do at the end of this year? What is it you want them to do this semester? And have those goals, and then have a plan to work towards those goals. One thing that I did, especially the later years at Kanawha, we never really talked about awards. When we would meet in August to start that lovely marching band process, we would simply have this goal, and that was to get better. And so there were days when a rehearsal didn't go as well as it should have. I would simply ask the students, did we get better? And if their answer was no, they knew they needed to step it up the next day. If their answer was yes, then we were on track. And even when we would get to contests, I would ask them before we went on the field, have we gotten better since August? And they would say yes. I said, then go do your best and things will work out like they need to. I know some directors get really hung up on how many trophies and how many, and plaques are on the wall of the band room. My philosophy was, if you get better, those things are going to take care of themselves. One thing I think you have to do in a small school, and probably in a big school these days as well, keep your rehearsals moving. Don't let them drag. We live in this electronic age where kids are used to having, these phones in their hands and playing games and all this stuff, and it moves fast. And so in a rehearsal, I think you have to keep things moving. I did a clinic with a young teacher last year who afterwards she said, I really learned a lot by watching, and she was a first-year teacher. And I said, well, what kind of things did you learn? She said, you really keep rehearsal moving. And I said, yes, I think you have to. Yes, I would love to spend, 20 minutes tuning those flutes on that, high D, but we've got to get moving. And so keep rehearsals moving. The next is Be efficient. Again, you're the only director in small school, wherever. You don't want to spend 20 hours a day in the band room. So figure out ways to save time, both in rehearsal and out of rehearsal. So for instance, in rehearsal, again, keep it moving. Figure out your system, whatever system that is, that the students know. You don't have to wait 5 minutes for them to pull up music, or you don't have to wait 5 minutes for them to get back to their set during marching band. You have a system developed that they get there, we get things done. An area director always asked me, he said, how is it you get what you get done and you don't do morning rehearsals? And my answer was, we just have to work. We have to be efficient. We have to work fast and get those things done. So figure out some things that you can do and the students can do. So for instance, some things that I always did, I never let students count money. I always took care of that. Things like bus requests, requisitions, calendar requests, those kind of things I took care of. Things that the students can do, students can move chairs and stands. They can get the room set up for rehearsal that morning. They can check roll. I would usually start the warm up and I would have my first chair flute or first chair clarinet, have them check roll. That's something you can hand off to them, go ahead and get rehearsal started. Things like passing out music and picking up music. I taught my students after a concert, we're picking up all the music. Hey, here's score order. Okay, pick it up. And that way, when it's all passed in, it's ready to be filed back to the music library, and you don't have to spend a lot of time going back through that. So figure out ways that they can help you with that. Next is control the classroom environment. And this is going to sound very simple, but clean your band room. I currently work for a music store where 4 days a week I travel to schools in the southeastern part of Oklahoma. And there's some band rooms I go into that are very dirty. And I think that just sets a tone for your rehearsals. That tells the students, oh, he doesn't care about how things run in here, because we can just trash it and nothing ever gets done. So, clean the band room. Get the students to help do that. Don't allow them to trash the band room out. Classroom management. I see a lot of young teachers struggle with this. My philosophy always was, if the students weren't paying attention, they couldn't learn. So some directors allow more talking than others, and it seems to work for them. But for the most part, if it's loud and crazy in your band room, things probably aren't going to get done. So figure out your system as to how you want that to be managed. What are the consequences when students don't meet your expectations? And make sure that you manage your classroom in a way that's going to allow the students to be successful. And then be consistent on a daily basis. We talked earlier about the attitude. Also be consistent with your expectations for your students. If they, for instance, like your fifth grade band, they don't bring their instrument that day. What's the consequence for not having their instrument? They don't have their book. What's the consequence? All those kind of things that need to be taken care of, because if one student doesn't bring their horn and the rest of the class says, oh, well, they didn't get in trouble, guess how many are not going to bring their instrument the next day? So make sure that you have a consequence and you're consistent with that. When I retired, I had a school board member who made the comment. He said, the thing I respected the most about you was you didn't ever care what somebody's last name was. And in small towns, the politics can sometimes be extremely important. But to me, it didn't matter that his daughter was, and in fact, he talked about the story of when he was on the board, his daughter was going to miss a performance. And I said, well, her grade will be docked however much. And he said, you didn't care that I was on the school board. And I said, no. So just be consistent, and the students will appreciate that. The next, evaluate your goals. You need to have high but realistic goals for your band program. In Kanawha, we were in a rural area. Only a handful of students in the 21 years I was there took private lessons. So I knew that my band wasn't going to play like some of the 6A bands in Oklahoma. but I knew that we could still play at a level that we could challenge them and still be successful. So like for instance, in Oklahoma, we have a list, prescribed music list that you have to pick something off of to play at concert contests. And so we were a Class 3A band. We could have played off that, but most of the years we played off the 4A list. We played a class up because I felt like the students needed that challenge, but we could still be successful. I didn't pick something off the 6A list. I didn't want to play Lincolnshire at contest, but we could still play some good music, some challenging music, and still meet our goals. Same thing for marching band shows. I see some small schools that try to do basically drum corps shows, and they're just not able to be successful at that. I always felt like if my crowd couldn't walk away on Friday night whistling a tune out of our show, I didn't do my job, because those are the people that are going to buy your candy bars and your candles and all that fundraising stuff. And if they couldn't understand my show on a weekly basis, then I need to reevaluate my goals. I think success breeds success. If you pick the right goals, something your kids can be successful at, I think that just continues itself. The longer I was at Conwall, the more I heard kids basically, if we weren't doing as good as we needed to, older ones would get on the younger ones and say, hey, we're not going to be the band that breaks the streak, so let's get after it. So I think success breeds success in that manner. Next, be a people person. You're in a small town. You're going to know everybody. If you're there very long, you're going to know who everybody is. So how do you treat people? Here's some little tidbits. First group is support staff and secretaries. These people can make or break you in your job. So the secretaries, I always treated all of the secretaries and support staff with great respect. And the maintenance people, a lot of times I would get things done before other teachers did, because other teachers kind of looked down on them, like, well, you're the maintenance guy. And I would go in and say, hey, if you guys need an inside job on a hot day, I've got some light bulbs that could be replaced. No big hurry, but just when you get to it. And usually they would be there in about 15 minutes to get my light bulbs replaced. So how do you treat people? Do you treat them with respect, or do you look down on them? The secretaries, oh man, they can make or break you. All those requisitions you're turning in, which I didn't always do perfectly, they would forgive me and kind of fix it for me, and we'd go on our way. Each fall we hosted a marching contest at Conwall, where we'd have like 30 bands show up in a town of 1,400 people. And we always said we tripled the population that day. The secretaries, they actually help feed the judges at our lunch break. They made my invoices to send out to people for them to pay their entry fee, because I didn't have a band secretary. So, I was it. I was the band secretary. So those secretaries would help me do those things. A little something I always did every year when we would get our band T-shirts ready, the first people that got those T-shirts were the support staff, the secretaries, and the cafeteria people. And we talked about recruiting earlier. We'd get those T-shirts in, I'd take them to the cafeteria people, and that first Friday, those kids, grades 1 through 12, were going through that line in the cafeteria, and those cafeteria people, they don't have their football jersey on, they've got their band T-shirt on. And so instant recruiting right off the bat. And always ask, don't demand. And again, that's just treating them with respect. Just ask them, hey, can you help me out with this? Next is, can you talk to people in the community? Know what the people in your community do. If you've moved in from a different part of the country or a different part of the state, what do those people in that community do for a living? And can you talk the talk? In Conwall, we had people that worked at a power plant. So, could you talk a little bit about, that business? A lot of agriculture, oil field people. So could you relate to what those people were doing? Next, Can you talk to coaches? A lot of small schools, especially in our part of the United States, athletics is a big thing, especially football. So can you have a working relationship with coaches so that you can share those kids? Can you go to the football coach and say, Coach, is it okay if my band kids march with us on Friday night at halftime? And a lot of times, sure, they didn't care unless it was a big major game or a playoff game or something. So build those relationships. The basketball coach at Conwell every year, when he would start scheduling his schedule for the next year, he would come to me and say, Mr. Longest, when do you want your Christmas concert? And we'd work out a night for me to have my Christmas concert amidst all the basketball games. Next, can you talk to administrators? And I should put administrators/counselors. Administrators don't like surprises. So make sure you give them a heads up on any kind of discipline issues. Can you talk to them about current school laws? Can you talk to counselors about what are the current requirements for students? Because a lot of times I've seen counselors tell students, yes, you have to have this class to graduate, when actually they didn't. It was only recommended. And so can you talk to those people and have that working relationship so nothing like that happens? Okay, and the last thing, be a promoter. I think a lot of times we fail in this area of promoting our kids. And I'm going to have to give a hats off to coaches in this regard. They're really good about promoting their kids. So put things in the local paper, those who still have a local paper. Conwell, they had a weekly paper, came out once a week. They were dying to have things in the paper about the school. So make sure you put things in there. Again, the football team at Conwell was really bad for a long time. A lot of 0-10 seasons, 1-9, but every week there was something in the paper. Tigers fight really hard, but lose 45-0. But there was a positive spin to it. So anything that your kids are doing, put that in the paper. If you have a band website, put it on that website so the parents can see, hey, my little Johnny's really doing well. And maybe do things like a band student of the week, or most improved for the week, or anything you can come up with to put those things in the paper. Advertise coming events. Put again on your band website, your band Facebook page, whatever. Make sure that let the community know what's going on. And finally, I like that. The influence for good teaching can never be erased. The rewards that you will gain from being in a small school will last you a lifetime. I still have students to this day that call or text or email me, and it's great to have those relationships that you've built through the years, because you've had an impact on those kids. Good luck to everybody. Have a great year. And if we have any questions, Giovanna, I guess we'll do those.
All right. I was listening to your presentation, which is great and so applicable, not just to directors in small schools, but also to directors in large schools. And I'm just wondering, now that you're retired and you can see your life from a different perspective, I'm curious to see what advice, what was the best piece of advice you ever got, and the one that you'd be sure to want to pass on to teachers beginning their career?
Oh, wow. The best piece of advice I probably ever got was, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And I think that's probably the same advice I'd give to somebody starting out today, is don't be afraid to ask for help. Again, if you're in that small school, there's nobody else, there with you on a daily basis to ask. So, there were guys in my area when I started teaching that I called constantly. And how do you do this? How do you do that? And that would probably be the biggest advice, is don't be afraid to ask for help.
That is definitely great advice. I think myself included, sometimes it's hard to ask for help because we think that we need to be able to do it all on our own,
Right.
and that's so not the case. So
Yes.
yeah, that is great advice. What advice do you have for a young teacher who's trying to portray that professionalism that you were talking at the very beginning and keep that safe distance between him and the students? Well,
Yeah,
especially if the age of that teacher is not that distant from the age of the student.
exactly. Yeah, never be alone with a student. Always make sure there's people around, um, and just remember you're the adult. And like I say, there might not be 3 or 4 years difference sometimes between that teacher and say a senior in high school.
Mm,
Um, but you just have to remember that you are the adult, and always keep things in a professional setting. Um, don't try to get involved in their conversations about, hey, here's what's happening Friday night, here's whatever. Just kind of distance yourself from that, and just make sure that that you keep everything in a professional setting.
great advice. Any other questions from the audience? I have one more of my own. I'm giving you guys a chance to type in your questions. I was thinking of this other one when you were talking about the coaches. It sounds like you were very fortunate to work with people that would work with you.
Yes,
Um, that's not always the case.
true.
So what advice would you have for a band director or an orchestra director or a choir director who shares students with a coach, for example,
Mhm.
and the coach maybe is not as willing to work with the teacher on sharing those students?
I always tried to put it back to them in a way that they could understand. So I'd put it back to them in an athletic setting. You know, all right. I'd say, okay, so would you be wanting to go play Friday night's game without being able to practice with your defense for 3 days this week? You know, and I would try to put it in their language,
Mm-hmm.
where they could understand that. Um, I was probably fortunate because I played athletics. I played basketball, baseball when I was in school, so I kind of understood that. I have a brother that's a football coach, so we've had some interesting discussions, at times. And actually, one year I was the junior high softball coach at Conowall, and so that probably helped me, probably more so than some teachers would. But I always put it back to them in that language that they could understand.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Any questions from the audience? None? Okay. Well, I wanted to let everybody know that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a link to the recording in a thank you email in the next coming days. We also have done a long series of webinars, and all of those recordings are archived on the SmartMusic YouTube channel. So if you want to check those out, you can just go to YouTube and search for SmartMusic, and one of our playlists will say webinars. So you can hear, in the future, you'll be able to find this very recording, as well as many of the other ones that we've done in the past. So thank you again, Donny, for your time and your insights and your expertise in this wonderful presentation that you gave today. And thank you, everybody who came to the webinar, for your time. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.